Hey guys, I'm Aksys and welcome back to another tryout. Today's tryout is on a game called NG, or Spirit Hunter NG. It depends. The original name is just NG, but I think in the West, it got the Spirit Hunter. I don't know what to call it. It's like a franchise. This game is a sequel to Deathmark. I don't know if you remember Deathmark. I did a video on Deathmark a while back, and this is a sequel to it. I have not finished Deathmark, but it's fine because this isn't like a direct sequel. It's sort of like that anthology type of sequel where it's like the same concept but with like a new story and like a bit new aesthetics and that sort of thing. Though don't want to be confused with Deathmark 2, which is a thing that is coming out. All the games in Japanese have different names, but for some reason here in the West, they're all given a more cohesive branding for whatever reason. Even Deathmark has sort of been rebranded in the West as Spirit Hunter Deathmark in various cases. It's kind of weird, but that's besides the point right now. NG is a pretty similar game to Deathmark. They're both visual novels. They both have the same basic structure. NG has a different aesthetic to it in terms of its UI and stuff, and I think the UI looks better here in NG. In Deathmark, especially playing it on a PS4, it just sort of looks like, yes, this was a Vita game that they ported to the PS4, whereas NG doesn't look that way as much to me. It's got, a bit more standard UI for a game that you'd play on a larger screen, or at least this UI adapts better to this larger screen than I think Deathmark's does. Deathmark just feels like its UI is more suited to a handheld. Otherwise, the games have different vibes to them. In Deathmark, you're this sort of amnesiac dude, and you're really thrust into the spookiness of it all very immediately, and it's just alright, here you are, it's spookum time. Whereas NG starts with you being this sort of thug, delinquent-ish high schooler dude, and it's 1999, and you punch a low-level Yakuza man at the very beginning, and it's just a very different situation. You're not oh no, I don't know what's happening, I'm gonna die soon. You really are just sort of I am an angsty teenager, except I don't look like a teenager, I look 23. This guy does not look like he is in his last year of high school. He looks a few years older than that. And NG also has a slower pace, it seems. Like I mentioned, Deathmark gets you right in the spooks immediately, and NG, it's a bit there's 3 scares maybe in the first hour and a half, so it's a lot less. You're given a lot more basis for who the characters are and what's going on, because you have a main character who knows who he is. We have some side characters. We have a situation. So they try to introduce you to the characters so that when the inciting incident happens, you kind of care a little bit, which is just a different way to do things. It's just sort of coming off of Deathmark, which I think has a really immediate, very deep horror atmosphere. I'm having we're just looking at we're just hanging out with a child. Just going on adventures with this child instead. It's okay. It took an hour and a half to get to that inciting incident, and I think at where I stopped, I had just finished the prologue basically. So it feels like this game probably has a slower pace than Deathmark does. Visually, the game is as stylish as Deathmark. I think that this has a slightly more refined version of it's pretty much the same art style. I think this one is a more refined version of that art style. It feels a bit cleaner, a bit more painterly. That might just be my memory. That's just sort of what it seemed to me. But overall, it's just on par with the previous game. It's still more of the same type of fairly detailed CGs and all that. The music in the first game I felt got a little repetitive, and some of that music, it seems, comes back for NG, but NG also has like its own selection of like some more jazzy music, and it's got like an idol who is part of the main story who has a song, and that song Wonder Rabbits is kind of a jam. Like, yeah, I was just like sort of going like jamming out to it as it played when I was playing it earlier. So it's like, there's not a version with lyrics. I mean, there are lyrics. There's not a version with recorded lyrics, which is kind of a shame. I feel like if I made a game and there was an idol and there was a song that played, I would just make a lyrics version of the song to play over the credits. But that's just me, a musician, so it's probably just a different world. As for kind of a downside, I guess, is that NG doesn't feel as much like a horror game from my like first experience with it. Like, it's definitely like got horror elements, but that just doesn't feel so much that like it is scary. And you know, the reason that I haven't finished Deathmark is because I'm a scaredy cat. I'm a bit of a scaredy cat, and so I don't want to play it alone, and so I just don't play it. So I'll play it sometimes if my partner's around and I think about it, and that's about it. And so I haven't finished Deathmark, but I think it's a very much a horror game. And while I'm sure as NG goes on, it probably develops into more horror, the elements set up so far aren't nearly as scary as Deathmark. And so I think it just sort of loses that like definite horror game thing, and it sort of fits into more of like a psychological thriller with horror elements type of thing. But that's, again, just my first impressions. I've played like an hour and 40 minutes. I think my save file said an hour and 38 minutes or something when I last saved. So that's all I've gotten so far. But I think based on what I've played that I will say this game passes tryout for me. In fact, like, it not being as scary probably makes it easier for me to play more of it personally, though that's probably a definite downside for other people, that like it's a horror game but it doesn't really achieve the horror part, at least again in that first hour and a half that I played. It's very slow going. It's building, it's biding its time, it feels. So maybe that goes somewhere. I probably will find out if I keep playing it, and I would like to, because I kind of want to see where it goes. And Deathmark 2 comes out next year or something. I think it's already out in Japan, and it comes out, like, a translated version will come out next year. So hey, I've done 2 of the games, maybe I'll do all 3 of them on this show someday, who knows. That's all I really had to say about NG. So let's get to the end bits here. If you like the video, hit the like button. If you dislike the video, hit the dislike button. If you go down to the description, you can find a Beacons.ai link that will take you to the rest of my links. Down there, click them, do what you do in those places. Leave a comment. Have you played any of these games? Did you own a PlayStation Vita? Leave a comment. Subscribe? Share the video. Do the things. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!